Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Francess McDonnell and with me today are my colleagues Aisling O'Brien and Louise Hickey. According to the latest figures, there's been a decrease in domestic milk intake by milk processors and co-ops this year. In April alone, there was a decrease of 81 million litres compared with the same month in 2023. We've also heard warnings from the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association that milk supply is back this year too, and that's predominantly due to weather conditions. This decline in milk volumes is just one of the reasons why the country's largest milk processors has launched a cost reduction programme this week. Aisling, what exactly is happening at Tirlán?
Yes, Francis. So the Kilkenny headquartered Tirlán has confirmed this week that around 150 jobs are likely to go across its organisation as a result of a new cost reduction programme. And as part of that programme, the co-op plans to offer a voluntary redundancy scheme to its employees. Now, it has said, however, that that is not going to impact on its milk processing capabilities. And it said that the key aim of this programme is to enhance its long-term competitiveness and to also achieve cost savings throughout its business. Now, they did undertake a business review and that identified a need for the co-op to actively manage its cost base. And look, I suppose like many other businesses out there, Tirlán has faced increased pressure. You know, we've had huge spikes in energy costs across the board, Francis, which have impacted all industries. And, you know, milk processing would be a very energy intensive sector as well. Of course, then we've interest rates, environmental compliance, wages increases and stuff like that they're pointing to as well. But as you said, one key issue that is facing Tirlán and the other co-ops around the country is a decline in milk supply volumes. And according to the Central Statistics Office, domestic milk intake was down by some 365 million litres in 2023. So that is an issue in the background all the time. But of course, an announcement that will come as a disappointment to not only those working in Tirlán, but also to the wider sector as well, Francis, this announcement. And, it is a cause for concern.
And what has been the reaction this week to it, Aisling?
Well, I think a lot of the reaction from the farm orgs has been pointing the finger squarely at government policy, Francis. The president of the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, the ICMSA, Dennis Drennan, warned that this could be just the beginning of a massive restructuring of the dairy sector, which, as I said, he blamed on government policy. And he believes that the dairy sector is shrinking because of what he termed depressive policies and regulations. He said that it was perfectly possible to move smoothly towards our environmental targets while preserving our world-leading dairy sector and the rural economy. But he did say that, there had been policies that he blamed on government that had brought us to this impasse, essentially. And the Irish Farmers Association president, Francie Gorman, said that he believed this move for Tirlán to go and seek redundancies across the co-op was as a direct result of EU and government policies. So similar vein to the ICMSA reaction there. And the IFA president highlighted the contribution again that the dairy sector makes to the economy in Ireland and also to rural Ireland as well, and how important it is for those farm families to be supported. And he also pointed to how margins are being squeezed by government policies, which he believes are curbing production. And he says the tightening of the existing nitrates derogation is also playing a part here as well. And that is a cause for concern for Tirlán staff and their families. And he did say, look, morale is low amongst farmers at the moment. There is so much policy uncertainty. We do have uncertainty, of course, with the ongoing nitrates derogation debate, Francis. And look, an announcement like this isn't going to help morale at the moment either.
Yeah, and of course, there'll be a very keen focus now on milk prices.
Absolutely, of course. And look, we did see a mixed picture across milk processors who have announced their prices for May supplies, some leaving base price unchanged for May and others announcing increases. We've seen various sustainability payments as usual. You can find all of the details on Agriland across all of the different processors that have announced their prices for May. And I suppose interesting to note before we leave it as well, Francis, is the global dairy trade, that price index, which, is seen as a key marker of where we are in the global dairy markets. It actually recorded its first decline since March of this year, falling by 0.5% in the latest trading event, which was held on Tuesday of this week. So look, that is something that we'll be keeping an eye on here on Agriland as well. Of course, the GDT auctions happening every fortnight there or thereabouts down in New Zealand. And it is something that we do keep a close eye on, along with the processors here in Ireland and the wider dairy industry, to see where we're going in a global sense as well on price.
And we thought after the European and locals that might be the end of it for a while when it comes to elections. But there was a rather unexpected announcement from the current leader of the Green Party earlier this week. Eamon Ryan confirmed that he would step down as leader of the party after 13 years and that he will not contest the next general election. Louise Hickey was at Leinster House when he made the announcement. Louise, tell us more.
So Minister Eamon Ryan confirmed that he will step down as leader of the Green Party after 13 years in the position. He also confirmed that he will not contest for the next general election. Ryan's resignation makes him the second leader of the coalition government to step down this year. He obviously follows former Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. So there's a lot of change happening in the government at the moment. Ryan said he was proud of what he and his coalition partners had achieved, and I suppose you're going to have the speculation and people asking why he stepped down. He referenced the results of the local and European elections, which saw the Green Party lose both its MEPs and more than half of its councillors. He said that his resignation had nothing to do with the recent elections. He did say it was something he was thinking about for quite some time, and that over the last couple of years he realised he could not continue to work the long hours. The minister went on to say that during his time as leader, a narrative formed that the Green Party policies were costing people and that the party members were not connected to the man and woman on the street. He said that while the narrative continued to form, he didn't believe any of it to be true. He said he actually spent quite a bit of time in rural Ireland before entering politics, and that his party is committed to rural Ireland, and that the Green policies are only adding to the security and prosperity of rural areas. Ryan described this narrative as divisive politics and said that it won't work if we are to see the scale and speed of change that has to be achieved environmentally. Another thing that Ryan mentioned was that the Green Party seems to be subject to relentless attack. He said this was particularly seen on social media, and he said that it seemed at times that the party was subject to coordinated attacks in the comments section following any post that was made. The minister had ignored the negative comments, but he did say that the level of this negative response only increased in recent years.
And let's hear from the man himself.
I look back on the last 4 years and I am proud of what we've achieved. Reducing the loss of life during COVID, introducing a strong climate law, cutting public transport fares and starting an offshore and solar energy revolution that will not stop. We have the highest level of retrofitting in any European state, meaning that every week 1,000 more households wake up in homes that are warmer, healthier and cheaper to heat. We designed and delivered in our department the energy credits which helped people in the cost of living crisis. We are lowering speed limits and delivering the National Broadband Plan. Our deposit refund scheme is working. We have built out cost rental housing. We recognise Palestine, and I've been a champion on the world stage for climate justice for developing countries. Only yesterday, we helped rescue and approve the written nature restoration law in Europe. It's an example of what you can do. I could go on. Even our harshest critics make the case about how much we are doing to turn the country green. One of my biggest regrets is that under my watch, a narrative was taken hold that we're not concerned about rural Ireland, that our solutions are costing people, and that we're not connected to the man and woman on the street.
That was the outgoing leader of the Green Party and Minister for the Environment, Climate and Transport, Eamon Ryan. But who might be the next leader? Aisling, who are the candidates?
Well, somebody very close to home in an agricultural sense is one of those who have declared their interest to run for the next Green Party leader. That is Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture, Pippa Hackett. She confirmed this week that she will run to become the next leader of the Green Party. And she's not alone, because Minister for Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth of Ireland, quite a long title, Roderick O'Gorman, is currently the other candidate that has been declared. He has been 24 years part of the Green Party, but I suppose Pippa Hackett will be looking to capitalise on what Eamon Ryan was saying there, that one of his biggest regrets is the narrative that formed between his party and rural Ireland, and that disconnect and that disjoint that, the Green Party wasn't really in favour of rural Ireland and wasn't supporting rural Ireland and farmers. And that's obviously something that Pippa Hackett will be looking to capitalise on. Obviously that she's a woman as well, running for a party leadership contest, and the Greens have never had a woman leading the party. Obviously we've had Catherine Martin in the deputy leader role, and she ruled herself out quite early. So it's making for an interesting contest, and we'll have to see. We'll know by July 8th who the new leader of the Green Party is, but the names of members who want to be nominated will have to be officially finalised on Tuesday morning. That's June 25th. So at the moment, though, it's Pippa Hackett and Roderick O'Gorman who are in the running, but they could well be joined by somebody else. We'll have to wait and see. A week is a long time in politics, a day is a long time in politics, so it'll remain to be seen.
And already we're kind of seeing this big debate about urban-rural Greens, which is quite unusual.
Absolutely. And I think the Green Party is maybe having a look at itself as well after the local elections, Frances, and I suppose has concerns about the general election as well, and, how voters could, maybe punish them for what is that perceived urban-rural divide and everything like that. So maybe this is their way, and Eamon Ryan looking to what Leo Varadkar did for Fine Gael. And we saw that bounce for Simon Harris, and maybe stepping aside to reinvigorate the wider party. And it will remain to be seen who will take over the mantle and how they will do. Of course, look, it has been mentioned as well, like that Pippa Hackett, of course, she's a farmer in Offaly, and, it will be a stiff ask for her to claim a seat in the Dáil as well. And would that have a bearing on it? Of course, she would say that she's, as a super junior minister, sat around the cabinet table for the last 4 years as well, and she'd be more than qualified. But lots of debating, I'm sure, within the Green Party and without it, or outside of it, I should say, over the next couple of weeks. It will be interesting. And as you say, the dust hasn't settled yet on those European and local elections.
And of course, Eamon Ryan's announcement came just after a major personal achievement for him on the European stage.
It has indeed, because on Monday we saw the adoption of the nature restoration law. Of course, that would have been a real pet project, if you could say that, of Eamon Ryan's and his party colleague, Minister of State with responsibility for nature, Malcolm Noonan, as well. We saw on Monday the Council of the EU voting in favour of the nature restoration law by member states' environment ministers. And that now means, Frances, that the regulation has been ratified and it will become law across the EU. It was ratified, of course, by the Parliament back in February, but then there was meant to be a vote by the Council to essentially rubber stamp it and get it over its final hurdle in the Council. But there was disagreement and a lack of support cited for, I suppose, a postponement of that vote until this week. And one member state, Austria, flipped its position to supporting the controversial law, allowing it to be passed by a qualified majority. Now, that means that 15 or in some cases 20 member states have to be in agreement, and that those countries account for 65% of the EU population. And now, interestingly, as an aside, we reported as well this week, our colleague Charles O'Donnell did, that the government of Austria is actually set to take legal action against its own environment minister after she voted in favour of the nature restoration law, apparently without following proper legal procedure in that country. So we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out and what impact that may have in the future. But I suppose coming back to the nature restoration law, Frances, it does set a target to restore 20% of all EU land by the end of this decade and all ecosystems that need restoration by 2050. And that will include peatlands under agricultural use. Now, there is a specific target to restore 30% of drained peatlands under agricultural use by the end of the decade, by 40% by 2040, and by 50% by the middle of the century. Now, of course, as we've often reported here, this law, it's been condemned by farming organisations and maybe politicians from a more rural profile, but has, of course, been welcomed by environmental groups. And some environmental groups would say that this version of the nature restoration law, after it went through the trilogues, is somewhat watered down from what they would have liked to have seen going through. And I suppose in terms of reaction this week, Frances, Minister for Agriculture, Tirlán and the aforementioned Minister of State with responsibility for nature, Malcolm Noonan, both obviously welcomed this passing, and they reassured farmers that any schemes which are now formally adopted under the nature restoration law will be entirely voluntary. It's something that we've heard from the government repeatedly on this. And they also both said that the passing of the law will have no effect on current common agricultural policy payments. That was also a cause for concern about the nature restoration law. So as a result of the intervention from the government in recent months, Tirlán McDonnell said the targets for restoration and re-wetting of drained organic soils have been reduced from the original proposals. And in March of this year, the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, revised the national inventory figure downwards to 141,000 hectares for re-wetting of drained organic soils. And that change essentially accounts for those soils that have been re-wetted naturally. And the minister said that with the existing national commitments to re-wet 33,000 hectares of Bord na Móna lands, those lands are sufficient to deliver the nature restoration law re-wetting targets without recourse to privately owned land to 2050. And he said that that should be a strong reassurance to farmers that there will be no obligatory requirement on farmers to re-wet land due to the nature restoration law. And look, they said this week as well that work has already started on a stakeholder engagement process to support the development of this plan. And they also said that there has been a funding commitment as part of the Climate and Nature Fund. That's a €14 billion fund. And they said that within that, there is funding for the nature restoration law. But on the back of that, Malcolm Noonan did say that there needs to be, I suppose, an EU nature restoration fund, which is separate from CAP as well. And he said that that was something that was important going forward. Look, I suppose the reaction, Frances, unsurprisingly from the farm organisations is one of disappointment. They feel it was very cynical in terms of its timing, that the vote has been postponed to after the outcome of the European and local elections as well. And that was something that was reiterated from the IFA and also from the ICMSA about the adoption of the nature restoration law. Francie Gorman, the IFA president, saying it was always likely that the law would pass once the EU elections were over. And he said that farmers would see the post-trilogue stalling of this law by member states as a piece of pre-election political theatre. Dennis Drennan, the ICMSA president as well, saying very similar, that he said it displays in full the true attitude of some politicians to farming communities and the rural electorates who will be affected by that. And he said he wasn't in the slightest doubt that this decision had been deliberately delayed until after the votes for the European elections had been counted as well. The Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association said that this nature restoration law and its adoption would cause serious unease amongst many farmers. It was looking for guarantees about the future and how it would impact farmers, and that their property rights would be protected in all of this. And the Irish Nature and Hill Farmers Association also called for immediate engagement, and as we heard, that stakeholder process underway now by government as well. Rural TDs, as we've heard from previously, have reiterated their concerns too. Michael Fitzmaurice, Marion Harkin, Carol Nolan among those coming out in opposition of the adoption of this law as well. But as I said earlier, environmental groups welcoming it warmly. The Irish Wildlife Trust and Birdwatch Ireland saying that it was a turning point for Europe's nature and its citizens as well. So more to come on the nature restoration law, but it passes its final hurdle at a European level, and now we have to see how it plays out on the ground, Frances.
And one of the more interesting comments, Aisling, was from the independent TD for Laois Offaly, Carol Nolan, who described the nature restoration law as the last sting of a dying green wasp. So I don't think we're finished with this quite yet.
Oh no, there's a long way to go yet, Frances. And look, I think there are concerns out there. I think the government is, definitely trying to allay those fears in terms of that there won't be any obligatory re-wetting of lands. And there has been some acknowledgement of that from TDs, who have come out strongly against the nature restoration law, that state lands will take us definitely to the end of this decade. But from what the minister is saying, it might be beyond that as well. And, obviously farmers who might be interested in re-wetting that, that they could maybe undertake voluntary measures if they so wish, because, maybe there are farmers out there who might want to have a look at this as something to do with their land as well.
Now, this week saw the long-awaited balancing payments for the Agri-Climate Rural Environment Scheme finally land in farmers' bank accounts. How much will that be worth, Aisling?
So €21.1 million in total, Frances, is going to be issued to about 26,500 acres Tranche 1 participants. That's across, of course, the two streams of acres. We've got general and cooperation approaches under that scheme. So as we know, the scheme participants received either an advance payment last November, or then given the delays that we saw from the department, an interim payment was issued in February and March of this year of either €4,000 or €5,000, depending on what stream of acres that you were essentially in. So the Department of Agriculture has told us now that under acres Tranche 1, almost €230 million has paid out, and around 4,000 farmers will be issued with a balancing payment before the end of June, subject to clearance, of course. And following that, then payments will continue to issue on a fortnightly basis as contracts are cleared by department staff for payment. Now, each recipient is also going to receive a letter this week from the department detailing information about the scores that determined their level of payment. This has been something that is of a huge amount of interest to farmers out there on the ground, how they fared in the scoring system under acres. Of course, this is a new approach for some farmers, maybe not those who have been involved in results-based payment schemes where they may have had scoring or some similar approach on their lands. But for the vast majority of people maybe in acres, they might not be familiar with this. So essentially, the department said that there will be opportunities for acres CP, that's the cooperation participants, to add value and increase the level of their annual payment over the lifetime of their contracts. They said that a farmer's contract under acres is for 5 years. And acres CP participants will be able to avail of non-productive investments and landscape actions to improve environmental outcomes and to increase the score they received this week, and ultimately the level of payment as well. So, that will be something of interest. And so we are being told that decision letters in relation to Tranche 1 NPI application processes are planning to be issued before the end of this year. So obviously the participants are really keen to see how they can increase their scores and increase their payments. There has been some criticism of the delay in that as well. And the department also announced as well that they, in participation with the Acres Cooperation project teams around the country, have developed an information leaflet to provide an overview of the way in which payments are calculated. And the minister did say this week that the scoring and associated results-based payments are a new approach, as I said, for a lot of farmers. And he said that he was pleased to have been able to secure all places for farmers that wanted to participate in Acres Tranche 2. And that brings the total number of farmers who are going to be participating in Acres to over 54,000. And those Tranche 2 applicants should shortly receive an information pack consisting of an approval summary, which will give them information on actions approved under their contract, and a copy of the farmland plant identification booklet as well. So look, it is good that the farmers are finally getting those balancing payments and that they're rolling out, Frances. But of course, it has been a real bone of contention amongst farmers and farm organisations, the delay in these payments being issued. And it'll be interesting to see as well the reaction to the scoring process across the country as farmers open those letters and digest them.
Yeah, it has somewhat taken the shine, I think, off this scheme because of all of the issues that have been around the payments.
Yeah, I suppose the department would say, look, they had a lot of new schemes under the new cap and a lot of IT issues. And, obviously rolling out a scheme as big as Acres requires a lot of resources. I suppose, look, on the other side, the farming organisations would probably say do better, but, it has been a long wait for farmers.
And have we any other news on schemes this week, Aisling?
So we were told this week that there will be a supplementary payment run under the 2023 CRIS, which of course is the Complementary Redistributive Income Support for Sustainability, and also the Complementary Income Support for Young Farmers. A total of €9 million is going to be paid out under this payment run, 5.5 million going to CRIS applicants and 3.5 million going to those under the Complementary Income Support for Young Farmers in the coming days. And we have all of the rates there as well on Agriland, and you can look those up if you are waiting for payments on that as well, and revised rates that have been announced from the department as well, Frances.
And of course, on Agriland, we've also had details of a reseeding grant that's available to farmers this week.
Yes, Frances. So according to the department, the red clover silage measure and the multi-species swards measure, they aim to incentivise farmers to explore less nitrogen intensive forms of production. That is basically their reason for being. So these schemes, they opened for applications in early March. They ran as part of the BIS online applications, and they offer financial incentive of up to €300 a hectare, or approximately €122 an acre, to reseed land with 2 different sward types. So by the deadline of May 15th, Agriland found out from the department that over 15,000 hectares of land were entered into the 2 measures combined. There was around 5,300 hectares entered under the multi-species sward measure, and some 9,700 hectares under the red clover silage measure. And it looks like the red clover silage measure then was the more popular of the 2, with 1,392 farmers applying for that, and just over 1,000 farmers applying for the multi-species swards measure as well. So the department specified that amendments were allowed up to May 31st. And look, those figures, as always, are subject to a bit of change, as we go forward. And to be eligible under the measures, the swards will have to be sown between July 16th of 2023 and July 15th of this year, and established by the 30th of September this year. So a fairly strong uptake on those 2 measures rolled out by the department.
And I just also want to mention another story that's been very popular this week on Agriland, and that is that Teagasc is urging all Irish potato growers to fundamentally change their potato blight spraying programmes with immediate effect. And you can find out more on that at Agriland. But of course, potatoes are a subject that we keep coming back to here, particularly because of all the problems that growers have had with the weather and also around the price. And it's not just potato growers that are worried about the price they're getting for their hard work. Aisling, there were high hopes that the appointment of an Agri-Food Regulator would have an impact on that front. But what's been happening with that office since it was established last December?
Yeah, so the new office is tasked with promoting fairness and transparency across all levels of the agri-food supply chain. And this week came the publication of the regulator's new strategy statement. It's their inaugural statement, which essentially sets out a roadmap for the next 3 years of the new office. And the statement outlines 4 key objectives for the regulator, those being enforcement of agri-food unfair trading law, improved transparency on the functioning of the agri-food supply chain, effective communication and engagement with stakeholders in promoting fairness and transparency, and finally, the building of organisational capacity with optimal use of resources to deliver an effective and efficient service. So we were told that the board of the regulator, which of course is chaired by the former IFA President Joe Healy, will regularly assess progress on each of those objectives over the 3 years, and it will recommend actions if they're needed to ensure the delivery on all of those. Now, the document states that the regulator will seek price and market data information from businesses along the agri-food supply chain, which is both publicly and not publicly available. And of course, that will be of interest to suppliers out there and to farmers as well. And there will be the development of an effective stakeholder engagement channels, we were told as well, to convey the needs of the agri-food sector back to the regulator as well. Now, the chief executive of the Agri-Food Regulator is Niamh Lenihan, and she said that a key focus of the regulator will be to enable greater transparency on how the food supply supply chain works, and in particular, price formation mechanisms. And she said to that end, there will be a publication of a number of sectoral reviews in the coming months. And she said that a data request had been issued to businesses operating in the egg sector a number of weeks ago, and data requests in other sectors are also planned. And she said they will continue monitoring and enforcement activities in relation to unfair trading regulations, and compliance inspections will be commencing shortly, is what we were told. So that's where it stands at the moment with the regulator.
And that'll be something that farmers are going to want to see, because there has been this issue around what they've been describing as fairness and transparency across the food chain.
Yeah, of course. And I think, look, there is a mountain of work there for the regulator to do, Frances. And, you know, like a lot of farmers out there would say that the balance is not tipped in their favour when it comes to the food supply chain, and very much being price takers rather than price makers. So, you know, I think it is interesting to see where this regulator is going. And it's something tangible that we can kind of hold the regulator to account and make sure that they are delivering on what they've been tasked with by the minister and by the government. And look, it will be interesting to see the information that is supplied through businesses and those sectoral reviews as well, and what we learn about the food chain over the coming weeks, months and years ahead.
Yeah, that's just about it for us from another week. But before we leave you, can I just mention a lovely interview in Agriland that gives you a real insight into the tradition of building dry stone walls in Ireland. It's there for everybody to see in Agriland this week. But for now, from Aisling, Louise and myself, thanks for listening, and please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We hope you have a really good week ahead.